Minister, obviously we know from the media reports and from confirmation from your department that there's pending legislation on behalf of the workers. I'm aware, obviously, that the choice to action hasn't arrived without 11 long months of deliberations and negotiations and protracted discussions between management and the Labour Relations Court and the workers. What I'm concerned about is the pending legislation or the pending action, the effects it's going to have on communities. And so I suppose the question that I want to ask you is that do you think that there is any flexibility within your budget to support Bus Eireann in the views or the guise of what the workers are looking for? Please. Thank you.
Collins.
Thank you. Public transport, vital to an economy, vital to a society. I know that these talks have been going on quite a while. On the 10th of April, there seemed to have been progress being made. I've been informed that they were parking the most contentious issues and trying to deal with some of the other issues. The unions thought there was progress. They went in the other day and management, after 7 minutes, gave them the ultimatum that they were they're going to bring the cuts in on the 12th of May. I think the Minister should intervene here. The workers shouldn't have to subsidise the subvention cut in Dublin Bus. And I would like to hear the Minister's position on this. And are you, Minister, in agreement with the management's position in relation to this? Because the MBRU already have a mandate of strike if management is to use cuts. They don't have to go back and reballot. And I think they'd be quite prepared to take that action if management bring in those cuts on the 12th of May. These workers earn €33,000 a year core pay and basic pay, 3 times less, a third of what we earn as TDs. I don't take that money, but 92 grand. And I think these workers should not bear the austerity cuts. They're providing a vital service, and I'd like to know if the Minister agrees with management.
Thank you. Deputy Thomas Brown.
Well, Minister, I think everybody is shocked that Bus Eireann, with the apparent approval of yourself, is unilaterally intending to impose severe cuts in paying conditions on Bus Eireann workers from Sunday, May the 12th. And particularly given the company, I think, has carried out something like 36.5 million customer journeys on the last figures we have. I'm aware of the Labour Court recommendation number 20463, and it did recommend significant cuts for drivers, maintenance staff, inspectors and clerical executive workers. But after 5 years of deep recession, Minister, and earlier major cost reductions in 2009, which also impacted on workers on payroll and conditions, for many drivers and other workers in Bus Eireann, the current situation and the current threat is perhaps the last straw. As my colleague said, on very modest core pays, the Labour Court recommendation, for example, recommended that the first 2 hours of overtime is cut from time and a half to time and a quarter. Sunday overtime has been cut from double time to time and a half. Public holidays down to 1 1/4. These are workers who work very antisocial hours, who support the community when perhaps the bulk of our population is not working. And of course, shift pay and annual leave is also being severely cut. Now, those type of cuts, which are replicated for the drivers and other worker grades, will be devastating for workers and their family. One driver, for example, yesterday of college-going children, he told me that he'll lose at least €3,000 a year. And with property tax to come, health insurance rises to come, mortgage and other costs, workers feel that they just can't take any more. And isn't it therefore somewhat understandable that NBRU and SIPTU are now balloting staff on whether to take detailed action from the end of next week. Minister Varadkar, your government and yourself, I think, going back on your earlier speeches, saying the last all in this House when I was transport spokesperson myself for the Labour Party, I think it has to be fair to say that there has been a lot of efficiencies brought about in the CIE companies. We had the Deloitte review, for example, 2008, 2009. We had retrenchments. But a key factor of the last number of years is that you have consistently cut the public service obligation subvention. I'm looking at the 2011 annual report of the company, and it looks like it's down to about 15%. Now, this has to be perhaps the lowest subvention of any major national public service bus company in Europe. And of course, the next few weeks, a particularly bad time for any kind of industrial action, given that the school bus service may well be involved with 114,000 children with exams and so on. So Minister, final point, we really need you to take action. We need an alternative strategy, and it has to involve further national support for the company and the ending of attempts to scapegoat the Bus Eireann workers for the current difficulties. We also need a much more dynamic and innovative management team, and that could clearly be the first prerequisite. Thanks, Cahill.
Thank you, Deputy Timmy Dooley. I'll let you know when it's
Thanks
one to
very
go.
much, Cahill. Ceann Comhairle, our Minister, I should say, today we learned that Bus Eireann's unilateral decision to cut costs, seeking reductions in overtime, shifts in premium payments, longer working hours for office staff and reductions in annual leave has resulted in the threat of students being unable to use public transport during an exam period. I think that's a very serious situation that's developing, Minister. Bus Eireann has outlined that it intends to target about 20 million worth of savings, including 9 million from pay and conditions from the 12th of May. This has resulted, as you know, in SIPTU balloting over 900 of its members working in Bus Eireann, and it appears that strike action is very much on the cards now. It's more of a probability than anything else. We understand, though, Minister, that Bus Eireann needs to find savings. From this side of the House, we accept that. It's a given that as a result of the increase in fares, and particularly increasing fuel costs, lower passenger numbers, which has resulted in a reduction of revenues coming into the company, you're not in the position to be able to give the kind of support to the CI group of companies as previous governments were. I understand that. The Labour Court has pointed out, I suppose in a way, how this can be achieved, and it's recognised that the company is in a very difficult position. The Labour Court has stated that the very viability of the transport operator is under threat if there isn't something done. However, the lack of agreement between management and staff has the potential to seriously disrupt thousands of travelling public who rely on the services of Bus Eireann on a daily basis. As industrial action is most likely to occur in the exam period for colleges and secondary schools in the month of May, this is of particular concern to students and indeed their parents who do not have access to private means of transport. So, if industrial action spreads to include the school transport services, it is estimated that up to 114,000 children will be affected. That, I think, should bring into stark focus for you, Minister, and for the Government, that action needs to be taken. So what I want to know, Minister, today, where does the Government stand? Where do you stand on this issue? Does the Government have a strategy to ensure that our public transport system will not let down those who can't afford private transportation, particularly during the stressful period around exams? As all parties are currently committed in their position in this dispute, there's entrenchment on both sides. How do you plan to involve yourself? I accept that there is industrial machinery, a mechanism within the state, how these issues would normally be resolved. Unfortunately, we're at an impasse. It now looks very likely that a strike action will take place. That affects everybody concerned. So I think, Minister, the red lights are on. You can see what's happening. Don't have the travelling public and the students who are facing exams have to suffer in order to bring about a resolution, because a resolution will ultimately come at some stage. So let's get yourself involved, your department involved as quickly as possible, and thereby protecting those who depend so much on this vital transport network.
Deputy Brian Walsh. There was also Deputy Damien English. Is he not taking a slot? Okay.
Minister, I'm sure you're acutely aware, as are the other members present, the financial circumstances that facing Bus Eireann at the moment are dire, to be frank, and that has been acknowledged by both the Labour Court and by the trade union's own financial assessors, that the company is in a very precarious position, and its very viability and its very future is under imminent threat. The reality is that the company, and I think most people would accept this, the company has to identify savings, and it has to identify savings fast. It's accumulated losses of over 27 million during the course of the last 5 years, and that just isn't sustainable. The prospect of industrial action would have serious implications for the company's viability, for those very workers, for their jobs, and for those people who rely on the services. And as other speakers have pointed out, the timing here is appalling. 114,000 students preparing for exams. This may be their only mode of transport to sit those exams. We have a whole community of elderly and retired people who live in remote parts of the country that rely heavily on these services. And your initiative, which appears on initial data that's coming back is going to be a huge success, the gathering. It's important that we have the service fully operational during the course of the months ahead, so that the benefits, the undoubted benefits that are going to accrue to the country, that they're evenly shared across all of the country, not just in urban areas. As you know, many of our country's treasures are located in rural areas, and it's important that visitors to the country have access to that, and Bus Eireann will play a very, very important role in ensuring access to remote parts of the country. So the timing is appalling. I have a couple of questions, Minister. How long has this process of engagement between the unions, the management and the Labour Relations Commission, LRC, has that been underway? Do you expect them to re-engage with one another again in the short term? And also, in addition to that, the workers who have raised this issue, isn't it the case that, unlike other public servants, that their core pay has been protected in the past, will be protected in the future? I'd like you to address those basic issues. Thanks, Minister. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you, Deputy. Minister, you've 5 minutes actually.
Thanks very much, Caroline. I thank the Deputies for raising this important and pressing matter. Bus Eireann is in a very difficult financial position. It has incurred accumulated losses of 27 million in the last 5 years, a position which is unsustainable and now places the viability of the company at risk. In June 2012, the company announced its business recovery plan with savings of 20 million. I don't know. Well, you can
I'll let you know in a moment.
if you like.
Sorry?
You can listen, but I'm sure we'll provide scripts for you.
Hold on, here, look. This is not acceptable from the Minister.
Here they are, the scripts.
We have a script.
Thank you.
I understand the scripts are now being distributed, and I also note that none of the deputies opposite provided a script to me, and I had to listen to what they had to say. So I hope they listened to what I had to say.
Yeah,
would it be possible for me to start from scratch?
No,
Well, you didn't distribute it, but I'm not going to route you over something petty and procedural, if that's okay with you. This is an important issue.
I think we just...
And I have provided a script now, you did not.
Minister,
And you did not.
I'd like to rub the blackboard clean and we'd start again.
Thank you. I thank the Deputies for raising this important matter. Bus Eireann is in a very difficult financial position. It has incurred accumulated losses of 27 million in the last 5 years, a position which is unsustainable and places the viability of the company at risk. In June 2012, the company announced its business recovery plan with savings of 20 million to bring the company back to profitability by 2013. Approximately 9 million in savings were to come from terms and conditions and 11 from operational savings. Although much of the operational savings have been delivered, no progress has been made on savings from terms and conditions, despite the involvement of the Labour Relations Commission and the Labour Court in the process. Without the necessary savings from the changes to terms and conditions and ongoing intercity service changes, Bus Eireann is facing annual losses of more than 11 million, which are simply not sustainable. According to the Labour Court and the trade union's own independent financial assessors, Bus Eireann is in a precarious financial situation, with the very viability of the company now under threat. The Labour Court, in its recommendation on the 8th of February last, concluded that significant reductions in the company's cost base, including payroll costs, were essential to ensure the future of the company and to protect employment within the company. Under the company's business recovery plan and the Labour Court recommendation, there will be no reductions to basic pay or employment levels, and there have been no reductions to basic pay to date, despite the fact that so many others in the country have had their basic pay reduced. It is important to emphasise that these issues have been through the full industrial relations machinery of the state, culminating in a Labour Court recommendation which recognised that savings had to be made in order to protect the jobs of the staff. Before implementing the recommendation, the company engaged further with the unions through the LRC to see if any alternative measures could be identified which would deliver the same amount of savings. This process did not identify any viable alternatives. Now, 11 months after negotiations started and 3 months after the Labour Court recommendation was handed down, the company simply cannot postpone the implementation any longer. I'm assured that it will engage with the unions at any time and at any place to discuss alternative approaches, but unless these are agreed, the 12th of May implementation date must proceed. The future of the company needs to be secured for the public who depend on services and for the benefit of employees. Bus Eireann runs commercial expressway services which are currently loss-making, and legally the state cannot subvent these services. The viability of these services can only be secured if these savings are achieved now. I very much hope that the management and the unions will use the period between now and the 12th of May to engage in further intensive dialogues which will ensure that the necessary savings are made and the provision of bus service for the public protected and the jobs of the staff preserved. And I think it's important at this point to explain to people who may not know how Bus Eireann works. Bus Eireann essentially has 3 sets of services. It has school services which operate on a cost recovery basis. They cannot make a profit on these services because if they do, they have to put them out to tender. They have a second set of services, PSO services. These are subsidised by my department, but they cannot use the profits made from the PSO to cross-subsidise other services, because that would be in breach of competition law. And there are commercial services, and these cannot be subsidised or subvented due to state aid rules. So this is not an issue of subvention. So if anyone thinks that I can find 1 or 2 million from my budget or reprofile spending and provide additional subvention to Bus Eireann to solve this problem, they're totally wrong, they don't understand the facts, and they're misleading people, because I cannot subvent commercial services which are now loss-making to the extent that they cannot be continued. I also want to say this, and I'll conclude this, and this is really important. There may be some people in this House, particularly opposite, who think that this Bus Eireann dispute is somehow emblematic of a bigger battle between unions and government over Croke Park, between management and workers, or that it's some sort of ideological or philosophical debate about austerity. It's not. This is about a company that operates commercial services in competition with commercial operators, and the company is losing money. Its losses are now unsustainable, the jobs are now at risk, and the Labour Court says so. I want to protect jobs, I want to save this publicly owned company, and I want to protect services. And the only way that can be done is for the Labour Court recommendation to be respected. And I really appeal to members opposite. You know, there are bus drivers and Bus Eireann staff who have families to feed and mortgages to pay. There are passengers all over the country who need to get to work and need to get to school. The only way this dispute can end is by the Labour Court recommendation being expected. And let's not see bus drivers being out of pocket, or Bus Eireann staff being out of pocket, or anyone being inconvenienced, because the only way this can end is by the Labour Court recommendation being respected.
Thank you. There are 1 minute each for the people who brought forward the question.
So can I just, the question I asked, and you've answered it, but if it could just be a little bit clearer for me. I asked you, was there any flexibility in your budget to support Bus Eireann? And what you're clearly saying, if I'm correct, is that even if there was, you can't. You're not in a position to subvent commercial services, and I'd like you to confirm that. But can I also ask you to confirm for me the first section of the 3 sections in the organisation, which is school services, will they be affected next week, or will they be, you know, separate to the actions that are going to be taken?
Thank you. Deputy Collins, 1 minute strictly.
58 million has been taken out in 2009. That was my figure that I got from Dublin Bus. I think it was about 38 million from the drivers already. And now another 20 million has been sought, and 9 million out of paying conditions. This is core pay. I'm a post office worker, and we very, very seldom got pay increase, but we always was negotiated where shift work, extra night NDA, all that type of thing to try and support the wage that we had, because we had very low wage. These workers are very low paid workers, and they cannot and will not accept these cuts. And I would ask you, Minister, to intervene in relation to this. Bring the management back into the talks. They went back in the other day. The management stayed 7 minutes and walked out with an ultimatum. They're going to bring the cuts in on the 12th of May. That's not the way to do business. They should be sitting in there at the unions at this time discussing this.
Thank you, Deputy Collins. Deputy Brown. 1 minute.
Well, there's no question that there's no bigger battle or ideology or whatever. All we want is that passengers won't be inconvenienced, and that drivers who are already on very modest pay and conditions, that pay and conditions effectively, people who have to work weekends, who have to work effective rest days if they can, who have to work public holidays, that they won't be more seriously damaged by this. So can I ask you, Minister, you're the person who is in charge of this. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to go back to industrial relations machinery, or try and use some other methodology to have this matter resolved? And can I ask you about Bus Eireann management? A constant complaint I get from workers is that senior management hasn't taken its own share of the burden. Is this the case? Would you know if it is the case? And is there not a question to answer in that regard? And has senior management also not got a huge responsibility to offer new, innovative alternatives to what is being proposed? And the final point I want to make, you talked a lot about the PSO and about what managers in Bus Eireann could do and could not do. The reality is that you have slashed the public service obligation support for this company, and that I remember listening to you in previous stalls. You have no time for public sector companies. You wanted to privatise this, and in the United Kingdom, when the National Bus Service was privatised, we ended up with an oligopoly of private operators. That's what you want, Minister Varadkar.
Deputy Dooley, please. Your minute.
Thanks very much, Minister. I asked you three what I thought were serious questions. The first one was, where does the government stand on this? The response I got was that you're going to stand idly by. The second question I asked you was, what strategy does the government expect to put in place to deal with those who will be affected by this strike if it goes ahead and who will not be in a position to afford private transportation? And the third question was, what actions do you take, or what action do you intend to take to mediate between both sides? And the best that I got from you on the two second questions was, I very much hope that management and unions can get their act together in the period concerned. Minister, there's more than that needed from you. You're going to have to take this as a serious issue. I'm not having a go at you personally. I know you're doing your best in this regard, but you're going to have to try harder. You're going to have to take the two sides together. You're going to have to involve yourself in a process of mediation. Clearly, the Labour Court, or the machinery of the state that gets itself involved in normally resolving industrial relations, is not working here. And we can see that, and you did go on to say, I think in an expected comment that I might make about concerns between the government and the unions vis-à-vis Croke Park. Yeah, I think there are people within the union structure who are mightily annoyed with the senior sections of their own organisations, and they don't feel that they're getting a fair hearing through the process of mediation that's there. So I think it will require a much more involved process, a much more involved intervention by yourself. And I look forward to your taking that on board, Minister.
Deputy Walsh, 1 minute.
Thanks, Chairman, and thank you, Minister, for your response. And I welcome your clarity, particularly in relation to the issue of subvention. It's very important that the staff and that the unions are aware that you do not have a blank cheque at your disposal in order to address this issue. I think that's important that clarity is available. Just a couple of the questions, Minister, and thank you for answering some of them. Could I ask you again, just to clarify, how long has this process of negotiation been ongoing? And do you believe that there will be engagement between the unions and management Bus Eireann in the next 10 days with a view to averting this action? And do you foresee a resolution to this? Thanks.
Thank you, Minister. 2 minutes, unfortunately.
Sure. To answer the questions, to Deputy Doherty, I can confirm that I cannot subvent commercial services, and nor can Bus Eireann use profits from PSO services to subvent commercial services, and nor can it make profits from school bus services. I don't know if school bus services will be affected. That will be a union call. It'll be up to them to decide whether or not they want to affect the school bus services. To answer Deputy Well's question, this has been going on for 11 months. The LRC first, then the Labour Court. The Labour Court made its recommendation 3 months ago. Then we went back to the LRC to ask the LRC to see if it could be tweaked. Those talks didn't go anywhere. Then, at the request of union leaders at senior level, I was asked to intervene to defer implementation. This was done, and now time has run out. The company is in a position where it won't be able to pay the bills in the coming months because 11 months has been spent getting nowhere, unfortunately, and that's very sad. Talks can continue at any time and at any place up until May the 12th. But on May the 12th, the Labour Court recommendations will be implemented. There is no alternative to that. My role is to tell the people the truth about that, and I hope other people here, when they assess that, will understand that's the truth and tell people they've influence over that is the case. And my role also is to put in place contingencies as much as possible, to put in place alternatives and to provide information where possible. And that's what my department and the NTA are now doing. Deputy Collins and Deputy Brune pointed out that most of the staff in Bus Eireann are in modest core pay. That is absolutely correct. It's also correct that core pay is not being reduced in these proposals. In fact, core pay is not being cut at all in Bus Eireann. Bus Eireann is not part of Croke Park. There was no pension levy, there was no public sector pay cut, and there will be no cuts to basic pay. What the Labour Court has recommended is that there be reductions in overtime, premium pay and unvouched allowances and expenses only.